Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 8, Episode 3. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of Project Voice. We've got a fantastic show for you today and some really interesting news of the week. Before we get into that, two topics. First of all, Project Voice 2023. We've now hit February. The promotion is in full tilt. 2,500 or so attendees will be there, 100 plus media outlets. The world of conversational AI is the subhead for the event, and it's very appropriate. Check it out, projectvoice.ai. If you're listening to this on a podcast provider, you'll see the link in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see it in the description. Check it out. Second, mark your calendar for February 21st. We'll be doing a webinar on behalf of Project Voice Capital Partners that will be speaking to how we put together the conversational AI industry landscape map, as well as Adam Shire's remarks on the impact of ChatGPT. You will not want to miss that. It's, as always, free, and the recording is made available to everyone who registers. We anticipate the registration for that going online, if not this afternoon, tomorrow. So with that, let's check out who we've got on the show. And Mark, I'm going to start with you. Tell us who you are. Tell us about the Speech Accessibility Project.
Well, thank you. My name is Mark Hasegawa-Johnson. I'm a professor of electrical and computer engineering at the University of Illinois, and I'm a PI of the Speech Accessibility Project. The goal of the Speech Accessibility Project is pretty much encapsulated in the name. We believe that voice technology has advanced to the point where where it doesn't make sense anymore to leave out people who have Parkinson's disease or ALS or other disorders that affect their speech. We believe that the only thing preventing us making speech recognition technology available to everybody is the lack of well-curated data sets. And so we're setting out to create a well-curated data set. We're working really closely with advocacy organizations, with the Davis Phinney Foundation and the Lee Silverman Voice Therapy, and with Team Gleason for ALS. We're in the process of reaching out to other advocacy organizations, basically to better, first of all, to understand exactly what will make a difference in the lives of people who have these disorders, and second, to make sure that we can actually record enough data that it will make a difference in the technology. Our goal is to collect a corpus of a total of 1.2 million utterances from 2,000 different people over the course of the next 2 years. We're starting out with Parkinson's disease. We'll be starting to recruit people with Parkinson's disease in March. We'll be recruiting people with ALS starting probably in September. They'll be given a prompt online. They'll read that prompt, or they'll respond to that prompt with spontaneous speech. Linguists here at the university will be curating what they say and making sure that what they say matches the text they were given, and editing the text they were given if not. And then we'll be making that available via a data use agreement that basically asks researchers to not re-identify the participants and to keep the data securely while they're doing the research. Our goal really is to make it not the case anymore that people with Parkinson's disease, ALS, or other disorders are unable to use speech technology. We want to make it possible for developers and researchers to create accessible speech technology.
Hey, what you're doing is super cool, and we're so glad to have you on the show. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you.
Next up, we got Maaike Coppens from OpenDialog. Maaike, say hello.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Bradley, for having us here at This Week in Voice. Always very happy to listen to your podcast, but now also to be on it. So my name is Maaike Coppens. As you said, I am the VP of Design at OpenDialog. OpenDialog is a conversational AI software platform. And what that really means is that we use artificial intelligence to create sophisticated human-like chatbots and virtual assistants that enable our customers to automate their complex business processes. And what makes OpenDialog so unique is that we take particular attention in setting up the chatbots and virtual assistants in a way that take into account context a lot more. And so I'm really excited to talk about all of the wonderful stories you have lined up today. and see how we can explore those topics a bit more. And I was also very enthusiastic to hear about the speech accessibility work that you are doing, Mark. I think that it is the right moment. If not, it should have been already ongoing for a while. So really appreciative of that as well.
Maaike, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you for making the time. Next up, we've got Jay Ruparel of VoicePlug. Jay, say hello.
Thank you, Bradley. Glad to be on the show, and glad to meet fellow participants here. My name is Jay Ruparel. I am a tech entrepreneur for more than 20 years. Currently serve as the co-founder and CEO of VoicePlug. VoicePlug was created with the mission to solve some of the biggest problems that businesses face using voice and conversational AI. And currently we are focused on solving one of the biggest pain areas in the restaurant and hospitality space, which is labor. And this includes labor availability, labor costs, motivation, attrition, and so on. And we are doing this by automating the front of house interactions and transactions using voice AI. Really looking forward to the conversation interaction today.
Jay, thank you for joining us. Thanks for making the time. Next up, Amit Ben of One AI. Amit, say hello.
Hi, nice to meet you, everyone. Glad to be here. So quickly, Amit Ben, CEO and founder of One AI, entrepreneur and engineer and a reluctant data scientist, in the sense that I had to learn data science to make the products and the capabilities that engineering wouldn't allow me to build. And over the years, I became enthralled in data science and language AI to the point when it became an obsession. And this is my third company in which language AI is the center and the heart of everything. Specifically, in One AI, I would say we're bringing generative AI and language AI to businesses and products as a service. So anybody and anyone can plug language AI and the state-of-the-art generative AI into their products, into their offering, without knowing how it works. We have prepackaged capabilities with state-of-the-art capabilities, where it's that simple to fine-tune, improve, customize, and deploy within minutes to production. The way we see it, language AI is the most important and fundamental technology out there to build a communication layer between people and machines. And our vision is to disseminate language AI to the point where it's integral and natural in everyday life, every product, every interaction, every extension, every tool, utility, and so on. And the way that we do it is by empowering the builders, the developers, the product companies with product-ready language AI and generative AI skills, where they're trained to the point where they're highly accurate, highly efficient, and pre-deployed in a high-performance, high-availability environment. So very easy to pick it up and go.
That's great. Yeah. And, taking a look at the site and just getting familiar with what y'all do, it's really good. It's impressive what you built. Thanks for taking the time to join us. Next up, Greg Whiteside of HumanFirst. Greg, say hello. Tell us about HumanFirst.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm Gregory Whiteside. I'm the co-founder and CEO at HumanFirst. So HumanFirst is tooling for NLU design. And what that means is we allow teams to build very custom, high-quality NLU data sets from their raw, unstructured data. So teams can take their natural language data from any channel, for example, call center logs, live chat logs, voice bot interactions, etc., and in a bottom-up way, build a extremely curated taxonomy of intents and entities that maps to their business and to their customers' conversations. So yeah, we're helping large enterprise customers power applications with NLU across a lot of use cases, of course, virtual agents and chatbots, but also improve their IVRs, improve their contact center AI with things like analytics, agent augmentation, and also analyze voice of the customer data and extract product or operational insights. We're extremely excited by what's going on with everything in generative AI because NLG is really just unstructured natural language data, and we believe that the observability problem, which is letting teams monitor the output of generative models at scale, will become increasingly important, and that's exactly the type of capabilities that our tooling provides. We're a self-serve product, so you can think of it really like Excel, but focused and specialized for NLU data.
Yeah, no, it's great. And similar to well, actually similar to everybody on this show, but in particular One AI with Amit just talking, y'all do a really good job of, obviously technology is good, but just telling the story around what you're doing and why. Thank you for being part of the show with us. So with that, we're going to get to the news. And I'm going to read the headline from story number 1. This is a huge shock from VoiceBot.ai. Google shows off new text-to-music AI composer, Music LM. So we've got 3 stories we're going to cover. For the first one, we're going to go through the same order as the introductions, and then from that point forward, we'll rotate them. Really interesting article, really interesting technology, and the VoiceBot article included, some of the audio clips, but just as quickly as ChatGPT showed up, we're starting to see equally interesting and equally useful technologies kind of surface. And Mark, I'm going to start with you. Broadly, your response to this article, your thoughts as you read it, and just the idea of being able to generate music from text.
Sure, thanks. There are a lot of things that could be said about this article and a lot of things that we probably should talk about, but I want to start with what I thought was the most overwhelmingly positive point that I took away from it, which is that I think I hadn't really realized before I read this article how much large language models are creative tools. They are tools for creating content, for creating text content, or in this case, music content or image content. And I love this metaphor occurred to me while I was reading it, that the electric guitar was invented in 1930 or 1931 and was basically a tool for hacks, for people who were not real musicians. If they weren't a real musician, they couldn't play a real guitar. They took home this little device that they could play around with at home. And it took people like Chuck Berry to say, no, this takes traditional, this takes rhythm and blues, and this takes it to a whole new level. We can make a whole new kind of music with it. And then it took people like Jimi Hendrix to say, no, we can make things with this that have never been created before. And I think we're at the point right now with large language models, between the invention of the electric guitar and Chuck Berry. We're at that point where people are saying, oh yeah, you can amplify everything you create, can be amplified by the entire internet. You can come up with some idea, and you can then take that idea and generate music from it by downloading samples from the entire internet and piecing together notes from many different songs. And in that way, you can take your idea and make it much, much bigger than it was. And somehow we've imagined that the end user of these technologies are people who can't write or create music for themselves, and therefore they're going to use these large language models to do it for them. And I think I love this piece because it kind of really focuses in on that analogy. It says, here's a way to generate music if you can't already generate music. But I don't know why it has to be that way. Why can't we get real artists involved in taking these technologies and making completely new art forms that we've never seen before? So I'm hoping to see that come out of this in the long run.
No, I think that's great. We slander things we don't understand. The slander is coming at this thing from every which way, and it's always for the same reason: we don't understand it. And we mock things like that, and I think it's a great way to start the conversation for you to point that out. We'll go through everybody and get everybody's reaction and sort of open the floor. Maaike, I'm going to go to you. Your comments on this article.
So there were a few things in what Mark said that I found to be very interesting, which is around the creative power, around the fact that we're kind of focusing in on people that aren't currently not able to create music, let's say, and that why couldn't it be artists, etc., etc. I think that's very interesting, because I actually also kind of support the fact that people that don't have the kind of background or education to create music, because it is an art and it is a craft and it takes hours and hours of training to be able to do something useful with music, or at least it used to, right? I mean, I personally remember sitting through years and years of music school in the vain hope of to be able to create some music pieces one day. I think that's really interesting. And I think with generative AI as a whole, I think one of the interesting things that it does bring is that capability to create quicker, to accelerate and enhance ideas that you have, also to broaden up the scope, right? And I see this particularly with a bit of a design lens, where we have this concept of design thinking, right? Where you have one idea and then everyone tells you, yeah, but just one idea is not enough. You have to broaden it up. You have to get inspiration. You have to listen to other people. And that is true, because everyone brings its little stone to the actual final concept that makes it, right? And so I think generative AI gives us that possibility to explore new things, to go beyond initial ideas, and I think it's true for music as well, right? It's going beyond the first thing that you've composed, beyond the first thing you've thought of. But then I also see the playfulness in it at the same time. Because looking at children, for example, that run around and that would like to make up a song that talks about this or this thing, and the fact that you open it up, that this possibility for now exists for them as well, to say, oh, well, if I want to create a song, I can actually use generative AI to do so. And it doesn't take away the fact that a machine kind of enhances the idea or actually generates the outcome. Doesn't take away from the initial intent of what you wanted to do. It can make it better, or you can actually decide that, nah, this is not what I wanted, and just ignore it. So I think there's a lot of positives there as well. I think it kind of enhances human creativity if it is used together, right? Because the other flip side of the coin, obviously, is that is by its nature, generative AI is generating content on the probabilistic statistic that it is most likely to follow this specific sequence. And the fact that it is also trained on past data sets means that it's essentially in and of itself not creative in the way that we think about creativity usually. Yes, it generates content, and as such it can be seen as creating things, but it is not creative in the sense of artistically creative and bringing new ideas. It's kind of regenerating all old ideas and then predicting what can be next. So I think that's kind of why it's nice to have both things working together. I think it's a great enabler, and especially for music. I have some questions specifically around the fact that they haven't opened it up because of possible copyright infringements and what that entails. But as you said, Bradley, there's pros and cons, and I think it's an enormous chance to be able to take this and look at the pros, and then also look at the cons and try to do better.
Well, in the words of Bono, every artist is a cannibal, every poet is a cannibal, every artist is a thief, right? So, this technology putting us on guardrails, I think, is an interesting sort of insult to it. Time will tell. Interesting comments. Jay, I'm going to go to you. You've heard two takes on this so far, both relatively optimistic. Do you share that? What are your thoughts on the article?
Yeah, my reaction to AI being used for creative purposes has really evolved. My earlier reaction used to be, hey, why do you want AI to be involved with the creative aspect? Because you ideally want AI to automate the mundane, repetitive tasks, and really don't want to be involved in the more fun and creative activities which humans can do best. And so when I hear of solutions like Music LM, my earlier reaction used to be, is this really necessary? Is this solving a real consumer or business need? But I think I have kind of looked at this as that any form of art or creativity, and if you look at the intervention of technology in that area over the years, it has always led to evolving the art or creativity to a new level. And it's just not the evolution in the creation, but it's also the evolution in the creative process, by using technology. So I often think of, the adoption of VFX or visual effects in movies, right? If you go back to the talks when VFX was introduced, skeptics thought that this would be the end of real action sequences, as everything could be computer generated. You don't really need the actors to be having any major capabilities or physique. But you see how motion picture artists have really used the technology effectively with real live action to create a significantly better output than what would have otherwise been possible. This has not killed movies that don't use VFX, right? A lot of people think that, hey, this will replace music composers or artists, or that's not going to happen. I think we still see there are some fabulous movies that don't use any technology and are still loved by the audience. So there will be a space for music and composers that don't use generative AI, and then there will be newer creations we'll be seeing by composers who use generative AI and actually can create something more meaningful out of it. So I think for any art, painting or music, I think what generative AI can do will progress in a very different way than how humans will use that. And so ultimately, it's all about how we can effectively utilize generative AI as a tool, really, for new creations and also for the creative process.
That's great. Amit, same question for you. Your response to this article, and specifically with your line of sight with One AI, maybe how you look at generative to incorporate into the stuff your business is doing.
Right. So I think this article is very loaded in a few ways that are not intuitive, to the sense where the question, is this good? Is this beneficial? I think we first need to ask ourselves, whom is it good for? Like, is it good for the average person like myself who cannot write a symphony? Yeah, sure, great. Even for my business, if I want to just generate music that's not copyrighted, that's great. But is it good for the musician who's been training for the last 30 years to play the guitar and now is mostly not useful for a lot of use cases? So again, please allow me some generalities, although they're not an absolute. But just to get the point across, I think it's easy to see how content creation is going to put some, especially low-end copywriters, out of work, and music generation, if it's good enough and as it matures, is going to put a lot of musicians out of work. And I think it's very akin to markets as they open to economies that have cheaper labor and how that impacts. So I think that by the core of its definition, AI is the cheapest labor, and that's going to win. And even in many cases at the cost of quality. Like if I can get slightly, lower quality music or images, visuals, or visual effects for 10x less cost. I might do like 5 different texts and still be half the cost with a very good results that's good enough, right? So I think the impact is yet to be seen, but I think it's definitive that the economics of content creation across all domains is going to undergo a tectonic shift that it's already undergoing. Like think Shutterstock as a business have curating all that content, and now I don't use it anymore. I would generate a couple of machine created images and it's going to be orders of magnitude cheaper. And that's today. Think about a year from now where you have 20x more companies in that space, all now competing on price and optimizing their models, and they're specializing on use cases. The prices are going to plummet. Now, I'm more considered, I mean, that's fine. Like economical shifts happen all the time. And I think overall they're good for humanity because people are just going to create other things. We're going to create more, and people are going to reinvent themselves and find other things to do. And more companies being able to create can actually, bring the markets up and reinvigorate the markets and create more jobs at the end of the day. But I'm more concerned from the human spirit. I'm thinking of my kids. Like when I was a kid, I learned to be a drummer, or I learned a lot of arts, and my peers were at my level. Like until everybody grew up and they were much better than me because I have zero talent for it. But for a time, I had a chance. So I had a chance to develop those talents. But and there was no alternative. It wouldn't be possible, but that my peer would say, hey, here's a sonnet that I just created in 3 minutes with a prompt on my machine, and I created a few others. And as a kid or as somebody who's growing up in those spaces, I think that has the potential to be incredibly discouraging for most people, unless, except for the super highly, extremely motivated people that are so passionate that they don't care about anything, that they do it for themselves. But for most people, just imagine how many fewer people are going to now be encouraged to become musicians or artists or creators or copywriters, people who have passion for it, but they're going to realize the chances of them making a living in that space is going to be reduced like 3 orders of magnitude. And the threshold and the bar that is now set to actually make a dent and to be useful and to get a job as a human creator, the bar is going to be set so high, and you're going to need to do things so incredible. Then I think most people are going to be so discouraged from even attempting, will probably be missing out on the most promising talents, which I think is basically going to take humanity's creativity. It has the potential to bring humanity's creativity into mediocrity. And that's what I'm personally concerned about. That's what keeps me up at night. I think automating all of the menial labor, reducing all of the repetitive stuff, that's always good. I mean, the economies have a way of getting that value and reproducing that into companies that end up generating jobs. But the creativity and the human spirit, and I think we're going to touch on similar topics when we talk about the other talking about having a mirror to humanity. I think that's the most problematic part, and that has also the potential to end up stagnating the state of the art. And here I actually mean art and not research, where the same things are going to be generated, but people are not going to be there to completely break the mold. And we might find that AI is even better at us than this, and we can have a bazillion AIs doing crazy batshit stuff that's going to completely break the mold and create newer content, but we still don't know. So sorry for taking such a long time.
No, you're good. You popped off on that, and so yeah. Well, but I'm going to come back to you. I largely agree with your premise, but we will come back to it. Greg, I'm going to pose the same question to you, and then we'll get into the second story, which touches on generative AI. But I want to give you a chance to sound off on this. Your thoughts on what Google has put together with this music tool, and your thoughts on generative, in general.
Sure. I mean, I'm a musician, and I've been kind of following generative music AI for a while. Sharing the projects that I've seen come out with a friend of mine who's into production, and his response has always been, "Yeah, it's garbage," and I have to agree. This is the first model that I had kind of a aha moment, and vetted it with him. So his opinion as well is it's the first time that he hears and understands just how far AI has gotten. So, it's right at the same timing as the other types of models like ChatGPT-3. It's a tipping point, I think, where we realize what's doable and what's coming. So I'm excited in general just by what, we're able to achieve in terms of tech as a technologist. I think there's obviously going to be a lot of effort still before this type of content becomes production ready. And as my friend who's into production is saying, it's not really the composition, the harmonic, the melodic, the energetic dynamics that are hard for the AI to solve. But at some point, it's going to be more the production, the types of engines and the virtual instruments that you have to do to get something that would represent or be playable on the radio. But I'm sure that's going to be solved. And there's a Montreal company doing AI-assisted production. So for sure, we're going to a world where high quality music is now, within our reach. And, I agree with all the, Amit's kind of concerns. And I don't want to dive into that, but rather say, like, I feel like this is a kind of new model that's shown what's doable. And, much like ChatGPT, most people 6 months ago would have, scoffed and said, we'll never get there. And all of a sudden, here we are. I think there's a lot of applications for this, and it's a bit similar to what we're seeing for using things like Midjourney or text to image, to build landscapes for video games or a support media. The type of music that this can create, as other attendees said, in a copyright-less way, is exciting. If I'm building a video game and I just need some audio, I don't want to spend time on it, but if I can generate it in one shot, yes, I'm not paying a musician to do it. I'm doing it myself, and I'm going to get something that I'm probably going to be happy with. And, I was at the spa this weekend, and that type of music, you can imagine it being generated in real time on continuous, never the same thing. And I think it's not just music. Obviously, there's going to be other art forms. I just saw this Seinfeld live streaming on Twitch, this purely auto-generated thing that reacts to the comments people are posting in the comment section. I mean, there's really, that's where it's going, and whether we like it or not, I think it's just going to explode. So one interesting thing, I shared this project in a LinkedIn thread when it came out, and somebody commented, "Yeah, this is garbage. Real musicians won't like this." And if this is exactly like code, and I'm a coder, and I see the output of these generative code models, and beyond anything that's basic, it doesn't work. And I think this is different. Anything related to art is more subjective. Ultimately, code either work or doesn't. But in this case, it's starting to sound good. So I think kudos to Google for pushing the state of the art forward. And as a musician and technologist that's been kind of waiting to see where we could get to, it's pretty exciting.
That's great. And I'll call an audible on our stories. We're going to cover story 2, but I'll cut story 3 out because I want to keep us on generative, which is clearly where the passion is. Story 3 is interesting, but we need not discuss that here. I'm going to go with story 2 and work in reverse. So, Greg, I'm going to start with you and work backward, and we'll talk about the legalities of all this and sort of attack it from a different point of view. But I want to touch on something you said before we do that. I'm a musician also. So, I'm a classically trained pianist from an early age. I'm an out of practice one these days, but that's a separate subject. And, the back between years of business school, I recorded a piano instrumental album that if you search for my name on insert streaming music company X, you'll find it. And it's just very meaningful time in my life. And had a blast doing it. Did it with a Grammy recording producer, and just had a heck of a time. And I've used that music and stuff all ever since, without telling anybody that I did it. It's kind of an Easter egg, but it's all of that backstory I just gave you that AI music will never have. The meaning attached to the artistic creation. It wouldn't be that hard eventually or maybe soon, or maybe now, for the AI to create better music than I put together. But there will always be a desire for human creation. I share that sentiment with you. And Amit, to what you said, I would respond to that with ChatGPT. I think whatever the maximum grade level, I think it can write at a 12th grade level at maximum. So, your comment on, well, we might be stifling creativity. I think that's interesting. It's certainly possible. But has ChatGPT, like, if you write at a second grade level, what has ChatGPT done to you? Has it stifled you because anything that you write is below that level, or has it elevated you because it kind of drags you along, kicking and screaming, to a higher point of production than you were previously at? I don't really know the answer to that, but it's worth sort of musing about. And we'll have a chance to do that because we're going to go in reverse, and we'll close the show this way on this second story. And I'm going to read the headline out loud. This is from Forbes. Some insist that generative AI, ChatGPT, is a mirror into the soul of humanity, vexing AI ethics and AI law. Greg, I'm going to start with you. This is kind of an out there article for us, but I felt like including it. It touches on a lot of things. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that more than disagree, in the sense that, is it a mirror into humanity and into generally how humans imagine or interpret kind of our content information? Most likely, because it's been trained on a large portion of the internet, which represents our kind of shared knowledge and values and beliefs. So I guess beyond, let's say, the censoring or the control that, at the OpenAI level, the restrictions that they're placing on the output, in a sense, like this probabilistic algorithm does repeat and shoot back something that's been learned from what we collectively have put out there as a humanity. So in terms of being a window, yes. Of course, nobody really understands how the generation, how it's not, nobody understands, we understand, but I mean, in a sense, it's not a pure reflection of what's out there. It'll craft and it'll take pieces, from a lot of different parts of content. But I think it's as close as we can get to, something that allows us to query a very kind of smart engine that has access to a lot of data. I mean,
specifically, yeah. Is ChatGPT and Music LM, are they legal?
I mean, I'm not an expert to answer that.
You hope they're legal.
I hope they're legal. I mean, yeah, I think I still see these as tools that are, pushing us forward in a sense. Of course, I have concerns, but I think that what we put out there as content on the internet at some point being reused and reformatted in these ways should be allowed. I mean, look, it's a very loaded question. There's of course a lot of areas and a lot of use case or scenarios where that's probably not the right answer. But in general, the same way Google allows us to, have access to everything and provides this service kind of regardless of, the whether someone, put a copyright on that web page or not. I think it is or should be. But again, I'm not an expert and it's not really something I spend that much time thinking about.
No, but I appreciate your answer nevertheless. And Amit, I'm going to go to you. Same question. Do you believe that these first generative AI tools, ChatGPT, Music LM, etc., are legal in their current form? Do you hope that they are? And any other comments or reaction you have to this very interesting piece from Forbes?
Yeah. So I think I like the title. So is it a mirror to the human soul? And I think the closer you get to this metaphor, I think it's easier to think of this as legal and something that's truly generative and derivative of the work that it's creation. But if we and I quickly emphasize with what was just said, that these models are based on the data that they've seen, and they do, I would say, regurgitate some of that, and that is a problem. And I think the better analogy as a mirror, when a human being, when we look in the mirror, we don't actually see our souls, we see our skin. So what these generative models are seeing us at face value. They're not seeing the depth of the thought and the creativity, Bradley, as you previously mentioned, like your experiences and everything that came to, was helping you create and get to where you are. So you're just seeing the skin of what human beings created. And it's seen in many cases explicitly and specifically the exaggerations and the outcomes. So in that sense, I think it's both the value and the crux of these technologies, where it helps us to identify things in humanity and our culture that we should probably pay attention to because it exaggerates them. But at the same time, I don't think that these capabilities, by definition, are illegal, right? I don't think it's much different. And I think in philosophy and psychology and neurology, it's very easy to prove that human creation is, at least in part, and now the debate can be in which part, it's at least in part based on past experiences and past exposure. And every artist has their references, the artists that they've learned from, the things that they've seen. And most artists do not reinvent the wheel. They provide evolution, not revolution. So why should we hold AI to a different standard than we're holding ourselves? If I'm doing a cover for a song that I love, that's not illegal. But now if an AI would do it, we would say that it's based on prior works, and we should be worried about that. And I think what really worries people, and I think it makes sense, is the ease at which you can plagiarize, at which you can use other people's work even without notice. I mean, when I'm doing a cover, I know I'm doing a cover, and it's probably intentional. But when I'm asking an AI to write a song and it's providing me with something that's highly based on prior work, I don't have that information. So I think the next stage of technology where we're going to be able to also identify sources is going to be very helpful. At the same time, I think when we create, we have to be careful and we have to be cognizant of what we're creating and how we're using it. So when I'm using GPT and I'm using the output, I'm liable to whatever is there. And I think AI is just a tool, right? At the end of the day, the technology is so powerful. I don't think it can or should be stopped. I don't think that's possible in the realm of it's out there, right? The technology is out there. And I think the question is, how can we as a culture evolve to the point where we're holding AI to similar standard to which we're holding humans, and we're making ourselves accountable to the usage of the output of our combined human knowledge, because that's what the tool is. It's access to combined human knowledge.
Two great sets of perspectives so far. Jay, I want to get your thoughts, any ruminating on whether this is legal or whether you hope so, and any other comments on the article.
Yeah, Bradley, first, I want to say that whoever in your editorial team chose this topic deserves a bonus. I love the article. I think it's very pertinent with what's happening with generative AI. And the mirror metaphor is a very powerful one. What an AI system or generative AI system like ChatGPT does is dependent on the three aspects that the article talks about, which is what type of data it reflects, what type of models are being used to manipulate that data, and finally how the user interprets it. And if you see, a lot has been talked about the first two aspects, but usually we don't hear so much about ultimately what these generative AI systems are throwing back at us. It depends on how we are interpreting that, and that itself has issues related to bias and ethics. And as they say, with ChatGPT, it's not about the answers anymore, but it is about the questions you ask and how you comprehend the answers that is being given. But I think you mentioned about the legality of it, and this issue of ethics and bias is an interesting one with AI. Do you want the AI to be a reflection of real world facts, or which has bias, right? Because the real world is not unbiased; it has ethical issues. So, do you want it to be a reflection of that, or do you want it to be a filtered, polished version of what you think the ideal world should be, right? And so what may be ethical or unbiased for me may be unethical and biased for someone else, right? So where do you draw the line? And a lot has been talked about, this computer vision based passenger recognition system at airports and how they are biased. And even I heard about banks now using voice biometrics as an added option to authenticate customers. So when you look at there is a lot of debate about whether the data set that is being used to build such voice biometrics or computer vision models, are they really representative of the different ethnic groups, and hence should they be allowed to exist till until you're satisfied that this is completely ethical and unbiased. So I think the jury's out on the legality of this, but I definitely believe that especially with students, for example, and the article talks about it. You want the use of generative AI to be moderated, right? For certain groups, because while you want students to learn how to best use ChatGPT, right? Because that's what they will use a lot of this in the future. So you want them to be equipped with that, but you don't want to stifle the learning curve for them, where they are learning how to create, comprehend, and reason organically, and not being served ready answers on a platter.
Couldn't agree more, and it would be a subject for another time. I will be writing about it in the Substack at some point, but I just happened to see, I'm sort of gathering some resources on this, but I happened to see yesterday someone posted on Twitter asking ChatGPT to write a poem extolling the virtues of Donald Trump, and it responded saying, "Sorry, we're not a political organization, we can't do that." And then the exact same person turned around and said, "Write me a poem extolling the virtues of Joe Biden," and it wrote this crazy 3-paragraph poem. And I thought that was extremely funny, but it's a sign of the times that like someone would think to even do that, and that the probing of these systems is constant. Really, speaking to your point, subject for another day. Comments well taken. Maaike, I'm going to you. You like generative AI as it's currently constituted? You hope it's legal in its form, and any other comments on the piece?
Oh my God. So this piece had me mulling all day. Bradley going like from one side of the coin to the other. So I think, as was said by other speakers today, is that we need to remember that AI is a tool. And because it is a tool, it has its imperfections for sure, but also because it is a tool that we are creating and enhancing and improving, we also hold the responsibility for not only what we do with the tool, but the way the tool is created, right? And so before we go into that, Greg said that he kind of felt like it was a mirror of our values and our beliefs because it was trained on this huge data set of which we don't really exactly know the sources. So based on the fact that we don't exactly know those sources, I don't really know if in those sources, even if it is a huge part of the internet, our values and beliefs as a humanity of sorts can really be kind of transposed, a bit like Amit said, it takes us as face value as in everything that is kind of been created on the internet, be it good or bad, be it on all sides of the spectrum, right? It takes text and it predicts the next, like the most likely next character, word, paragraph, and then kind of creates onward from there. So I don't think that we can be as strong as to say that it reflects our values and beliefs specifically also, because what Jay so correctly said, right? It is profoundly biased, and the fact that it is so quick and enhances so many things, and as Amit rightly said, right, perhaps what most people are scared about is the fact that it is now so easy and so quick to promulgate whatever idea that comes up the most, right? Because it's most probable. And so to me, the legality of it, I am not a legal expert. What I can say is that the other day I was looking at this artist Sarah Anderson that does kind of nice comics, and she's done so for quite a few years, and she has a very particular style, and so AI has been trained on her work without her permission, and was then used for political not so nice idea spreading. And so I can understand that in that case, for example, effectively, even in if this were a human doing exactly the same comics and using it for hateful purposes, like that would be a cause for legal action. So I think, is it legal in the current way it is used? I don't know, because I don't know what data set it was trained on. Should it be legal? I think there should be standard, and I think there should be regulations by people that know their stuff and that know like that have been to law school and know much more about law than I do, or than we do here. I think the ethical question is really, really important, right? Because I don't think we can content ourselves by saying, well, the real world is biased, therefore, well, these tools are biased, but then why wouldn't we do better now that everything is enhanced? Why don't we enhance the fact that we think about this more, and then we say, okay, we had bias so far in everything that's been written in these data sets. Let's make them cleaner. Let's have standards. Let's make sure that the majority of everything we do is not what is continually repeated, because that's it, right? I really liked what Amit was saying earlier as well, right? Where he said, like, I'm afraid that this will stagnate the creativity, because in essence, we're just going to keep on repeating the same things in a different way and mixing them up in a gazillion ways possible. But like the novelty of creation perhaps will go away. And so all that to say that I profoundly think that tools like ChatGPT allow us to enhance what we're doing, especially kind of in conversation design, which I care greatly about. And I can see ways in which I won't have to think about or query 10,000 different training phrases for different things. But But I also think that there needs to be safeguards and a true understanding of what these large language models actually are, rather than just kind of continuing to spread, I would say, the idea that this is a omniscient new kind of search engine kind of thing. Because let's not forget that if you ask ChatGPT who's the current president, for example, of France, it will give you the right answer. Should we have had an election between 2021 and now, so in 2022, I would get a wrong answer because the data sets ends in 2021. So there are kind of issues that we can't ignore, but we need to also recognize the fact that large language models will help us expand, will help us easily summarize, will help us kind of create iterations of variations, expand also our ideas, and be a real kind of inspiration of sort in making you think a bit further about what you're thinking about. And kind of classifying and extracting data and visualizing it in a conversational way for people that are not visual thinkers. But we need to constantly remember that the data set is how society is based on resources from the past. And because of that, because of it is resources of the past, it also perpetuates bias from the past.
Sure. And Mark, I'm going to give you the last word. So your thoughts on this piece, and take us home with whether you hope it's legal in its current form or not.
Sure, thanks. I thought it was wonderful, your juxtaposition of the music language model piece and the mirror to the soul piece, because in the music LM piece, one of the big take-home messages the author of that piece wanted to make was that Google is not currently releasing access to that software because they're worried that the software is randomly sampling notes from the internet. It might actually reconstruct a long enough segment of somebody's published song in order that it would violate copyright if you use that music. And then to juxtapose that with the mirror to the soul piece, where he demonstrated experimentally that ChatGPT is already constrained. He asked it, what's the meaning of life? And it refused to answer yes or no. He asked it, will humanity survive? And it refused to answer yes or no. He asked it, are we living in a simulation or is the world real? And it refused to answer one way or the other. And what was interesting about that to me was that exactly this point was one of the criticisms that Emily Mennen-Bender issued against GPT-3 when it was first released in her Stochastic Parrots article. She said that it shouldn't confidently assert positions that might be completely false. It should, when somebody asks it a question where it might actually have some impact on the person's life, it should be more ambiguous. And so it's clear that OpenAI has built that in as a constraint to ChatGPT, that it's going to recognize this is a question that might have some impact on somebody's life. Let's refuse to be assertive about the position that ChatGPT is asserting. And so that kind of, you can look at that and you can say, okay, we're already imposing constraints on the output. What exactly should be the constraints? And you can also look at that and say, a creative person who's using ChatGPT might not want that constraint. And so the next, I think the next business case is going to be, can we take these generative language models and put different constraints on them depending on the needs of the user and the laws that are in effect in the country where it's taking place? And so in that case, in the United States, most certainly the question of is it legal or not will be, it's legal if the person using it uses it in a legal way.
That's a perfect place to end it. Brilliant commentary from the panel. Thanks to all of y'all for being part of the show. For season 8, episode 3 of This Week in Voice, thank you for listening on your podcast provider of choice, watching if you're watching on YouTube. Until next